Parliamentary Under-Secretary of State for Roads and Local Transport. He is Richard Holden, speaking on behalf of the government today. Mr. Holden, good morning to you. Very nice to see you.
Morning, Eamon. How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing okay today. If I was what's his name, who we none of us know, Paul Bristow, what was his name?
Paul Bristow.
Paul Bristow. How would you be feeling if you were him today? Was it right that he got the red card for asking for a ceasefire in the Israeli-Gaza conflict?
Well, I know Paul very well, and I think it was the right thing to happen. I think you have to have a collective government responsibility. You have to have a collective position, and Paul didn't feel that he could maintain that. So, rightly has been moved because of that. I think that's really important. I think what we've actually seen over the last few weeks is actually right across the House of Commons, really, generally a pretty coherent approach to support and defend Israel's right to self-defense following those horrific terrorist attacks, the worst days for Israel and for the Jewish community, really, since the Holocaust, in terms of there's huge losses of life. And I think in those circumstances, it's right that Paul stepped down.
It's interesting because he said it was difficult to understand how the situation as it stands makes Israel more secure or indeed makes anything better. He's throwing a challenge ultimately, or he did in his 2-page letter to the Prime Minister. And I just wonder whether you think history will judge on his side or not.
So I missed the second part of your question.
I just wonder whether you think history will look favourable on the decision or not of Rishi Sunak for sacking him in this.
No, I think in the end you can't have a ceasefire when one side's just been attacked in the worst terrorist attack since the Holocaust, right? I don't think that's possible. That's my view, that's the government's view, because a ceasefire involves the laying down of arms. I didn't see the same people calling for a ceasefire after after the Americans were attacked on 9/11, or after London was bombed, or after Madrid was bombed. I think it's really important, actually, that we see this in the context it is, in which Israel has been subject to one of the worst terrorist attacks, in living memory.
It was absolutely. Nobody will refute that, really. But the thing is, Richard, it's just where does it end? And the fact that so many, not hundreds, but thousands of children will die and continue to die in all of this. It's just, I wouldn't like to be in a position where I'm having to make that decision. But by not instigating a ceasefire, we are confining, those children are doomed to die.
Look, I would also say, Eamon, the UK government has made it very clear that we want to see a humanitarian pause to allow people out of the Gaza Strip, but also aid to get in. That's our position, and we've been very, very clear on that. But I think a ceasefire is something completely different. A ceasefire basically involves Israel having faced one of the worst terrorist attacks ever, then just laying down its arms. That only benefits one side. That shows that terrorism wins, and I don't think that can be our position. I think Israel has every right to defend itself. If this had happened to the UK, what we'd have seen would have been thousands and thousands of UK nationals dragged off abroad and taken hostage. We'd have seen tens of thousands of people, those are the population equivalents, killed here on the streets of the UK. We need to be able to see it in that context.
Okay.
You're
Richard,
right,
Richard, there are other things
any of us wants to have to be involved in.
There are other things, however insignificant they may seem, and how can we talk about poverty being insignificant in comparison, but though it may well be. Nearly 15 million people living in poverty in this country. Those are the latest figures. What are you going to do about that?
Well, one of the things that we're doing at the moment, and I think that's relative poverty, so that's all related to the percentage of the average earnings that a household has. because we have seen some actually big falls, particularly in absolute poverty around children in particular over the last few years. But I think the key thing that I want to see happen is that, and we've seen it's been really tough for a lot of people, particularly during the cost of living issues following the inflation we've seen right across the world following the end of COVID and the war in Ukraine. I think what we want to do is help people wherever we can. That's why the government over the last few years has put over £90 billion into really helping, up to £3,300 per household for many, many households across the country. We've got some extra cash going in at the moment, some more payments for 8 million of the most vulnerable households, £300 each going in. That's the second of 3 tranches of £300 to really help people particularly with the cost of heating remaining so high. And on the other side, I, as Minister for Roads and Local Transport, am great to see the £2 bus fare scheme extended for a lot of people in low-paid work. The bus is how they get around. It's the most popular form of public transport. We're extending that all the way through to the end of December next year to really help households. Also, it's giving inflation down as well. Yeah, so we've got measures going in there to help families.
Yes, and great to see that cap extended, and as you say, a very popular form of transport. But you tell that to people who are seeing their bus services reduced or indeed cancelled, particularly in rural areas. It's all very well extending the cap, but actually what are you doing to make sure that those services continue to be provided for the people that rely on them?
No, I think you actually make the really good point there. We've got to do 2 things. When people come to me and say, this is the issues we're facing, one is affordability. That's why we've got that cap in there all the way through now to the end of next year. And we've also, on the other side, we've put hundreds of millions of pounds extra into support bus services right across the country through 2 schemes, Bus Service Improvement Plan and Bus Service Improvement Plan Plus. Local councils right across the country are getting that money. It's totaled over £3.5 billion already since the start of the pandemic, when we had to see real issues. People weren't able to travel on our bus network. And just last week, the Prime Minister announced the first tranche of over £1 billion of money going in to support bus networks over the next 5 years, which has been freed up because of the cancellation of HS2. So the first 150 million of £1 billion announced just last week for buses in the Midlands and the North. No government has invested like this government has invested over the last few years and continues to invest in our bus network, certainly not for decades.
But Richard, that's because you've axed HS2 and a lot of the dreams and things that were around that. But I thought, this is what I don't understand about the HS2 budget. So we can't build HS2 because we can't afford it. So then we take the money that we can't afford, that we don't have in the first place, and we give it out to the sort of schemes that you're talking about there. So we either have the money or we don't have the money.
So I think that the truth is, Eamon, that over 20 years you'll be talking around 1.5 to 2 billion a year spending on the HS2 project. The question is that the best place to spend the money?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
And my view and the government's view is actually the best place to spend the money is out there right across the country on transport schemes that affect everybody's daily lives, rather than on the scheme from Lichfield to Manchester.
Understood. We really have to say goodbye, though. Thank you very much for your time this morning, Richard Holden.